stop. Beloved Starseed of Gaia, this transmission comes directly from the Arcturian High Council, and it reaches you now because something in your path has already shifted, something you have felt but have not yet been able to name. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your life has felt like separation, what is being removed from your path, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The gentleness you have carried for years was never a personality trait. It was a cover layer, a deliberate design placed over something the Arcturian High Council identifies as a soul-embedded activation sequence, and the separations you have been living through are not failures of connection. They are the triggers, the people who left, the circles that dissolved, the relationships that quietly collapsed without a clean explanation. These were not rejections, they were activations. Each departure was a precise cosmic pressure point applied to the outer layer of who you appear to be. Because the weapon inside you does not activate through comfort, it activates through friction, through loss, through the specific kind of pain that comes from being misunderstood by people who were never meant to stay. The Arcturian High Council has already mapped this pattern. What you experienced as abandonment was a sequence. What felt like loneliness was a root refinement. The old line weakened first, and the visible distance followed. Because your path cannot carry the weight of both the mission and the environment that was suppressing it. Your gentleness was never weakness. It was the disguise the design required. And now that enough of the old circle has been removed, the layer is thinning. The separation process is not punishing you, it is preparing the activation. This is not a soft spiritual message. This is a live Arcturian path recognition for a being whose kindness was always the outer surface of something precise, something formidable, something that the old environment could not have survived making contact with, like this transmission. If you know your life has been narrowing for a reason, subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself. Comment 777 if you feel the old line is already falling away. Comment, I was separated. If you now recognize that what looked like rejection carried a deeper meaning, this is not just information. It is a point of recognition. The algorithm only delivered this. It did not create the timing. What has been separating you from the old line has already been seen, and the path is already responding. You are guided here because the separation is already active. What is happening to you right now is not what it looks like from the outside. From the outside, it looks like loss. It looks like distance. It looks like you have somehow become less magnetic, less connected, less capable of holding the relationships and environments that once felt natural to you. From the outside, it looks like life is contracting, like something essential is being quietly drained from a structure that used to hold, and the mind that has been watching this contraction has probably been working very hard to explain it, cycling through every personal defect it can locate, every mistake it can replay, every mistake it can replay, every moment of vulnerability it can identify as the reason people began to fall away. It has been building a case against you in the silence, and the case it has built is wrong. But what the Arcturian High Council is transmitting in this moment is this. The explanation you have been running is the wrong one. Not because you are blameless in every human interaction, but because the scale of what is happening to you exceeds the scale of ordinary relational failure. What you are inside is not something that loses connection because of minor personal flaws. What is happening has a different source, a different logic, and a different destination than the narrative your mind has been constructing in the quiet hours when there is nothing left to distract it. The separation is structural, the pruning is intentional, and it began before you were aware enough of your own path to consent to it or resist it. It was already in motion while you were still trying to fit, while you were still showing up, still reaching, still extending yourself toward people and environments that were already marked by the intelligence behind this process as incompatible with where your line was going. You have felt, for longer than you may be willing to admit, that you do not fully belong anywhere, not in the way you once thought you would. There is a specific quality to this feeling that cannot be reduced to introversion, that cannot be explained by shyness or social anxiety or the ordinary difficulty of a difficult season. It is subtler and more consistent than any of those things. It is the feeling of being present in a room, fully present, attempting presence, performing presence, and still registering somewhere beneath conscious awareness that the fit is wrong, that the shape of what you carry does not match the container you are standing in, that you are translating yourself constantly, rounding your edges, compressing something that does not want to be compressed, so that what you actually are can pass through spaces that were not built to receive it. You became fluent in the language of environments that were never meant to be your permanent residence, and the fluency felt, for a time, like belonging. But fluency in a foreign language is not the same as being home. And at some point, the translation effort began to cost more than it returned, and you started to feel the weight of a performance you had no name for. This is not a personal defect. This is the first readable symptom of a selected line under separation pressure. When a path is selected, and selected in the Arcturian sense means something more precise than simply being spiritually curious or emotionally deep, it begins to generate incompatibility with the environments that cannot sustain it. Not immediately, not with obvious announcement. The incompatibility grows slowly, like pressure accumulating beneath a surface that has not yet shown its first crack. What the person living on that surface feels is not pressure yet. It is a vague wrongness, a sense that something no longer fits the way it once did. A confusion about why connection keeps requiring so much energy when it once arrived more naturally, more easily, without this constant cost. This is the separation in its early readable phase, and most people who encounter it interpret it as personal regression, as evidence that something in them has degraded, that a formerly functional relational capacity has somehow broken down. They search for the wound, the pattern, the origin point of the damage, because a structural Arcturian separation does not announce itself in language the unequipped mind can immediately decode. It presents itself in the vocabulary of ordinary loss, ordinary distance, ordinary loneliness, and so it gets treated as ordinary, which means it gets treated as fixable through personal effort alone. But here is what the High Council has already mapped about this phase. The incompatibility that precedes separation is not the same as the incompatibility produced by personal failure. Personal failure creates friction that points backward, towards something you did, something you said, something that can theoretically be corrected with enough insight or effort. Arcturian separation creates friction that points forward, towards something the path is preparing to open, something the old environment could not survive remaining adjacent to. The friction has a direction, and the direction is not back toward what you had. The direction is through what is currently collapsing. This distinction carries an enormous amount of weight, because it is precisely the difference between a person who spends 5 more years attempting to repair environments the path has already marked for release, pouring energy into relationships that are thinning, identities that no longer fit, circles that have already begun their withdrawal, and a person who begins to understand that what is falling away was never falling because of personal failure. The loss was not random. The distancing was not punishment. The circle weakening around them is a root refinement already in progress, and the root is clearing precisely because something on the other side of the clearing requires unobstructed passage. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary sadness. It is the moment your path stops pretending that what fell away was meant to remain. If this transmission put language around a loneliness you have been carrying in silence, chosen one manifest, the protocol for selected souls was created for this exact stage. It is not another message telling you that you are special. It is a direct protocol for those whose line has already begun to narrow, whose old circles no longer hold, and who need to understand what the separation is preparing them for. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. The first thing the Arcturian intelligence identifies in this phase is what can be called the departure sequence. This is the pattern where relationships do not end catastrophically or with clear explanation. They simply thin. The person who once reached out regularly begins to reach out less. The group that once felt like belonging begins to feel like performance, like you are attending a gathering that you have already, somewhere below the level of decision, already left. The friendship that sustained you for years begins to require more translation than it returns in recognition. You find yourself explaining yourself more and receiving less. You find yourself leaving conversations feeling not filled, but slightly more empty than when you arrived. And because none of this happens with a clear event to anchor it, with a confrontation that names the break, with a moment of obvious rupture you can point to and say this is where it changed, the person living through it has no clean grief to process. There is no defined loss to hold a defined mourning for. There is only a slow accumulation of distances that resists every explanation the mind tries to assign to it. This is by design in the separation process. The Arcturian intelligence does not remove what is incompatible through dramatic event alone. It removes it through a graduated withdrawal of resonance, a frequency reduction so gradual that the person experiencing it cannot locate the moment it began. The environment stops resonating. The people stop reaching the depth at which you actually live. The conversations stop touching the layer where your actual path is active, and begin instead to skim a surface you have long since grown beneath. And what you begin to feel is not betrayal, exactly. It is something more disorienting than betrayal. Because betrayal at least has a shape, what you feel instead is the strange experience of becoming invisible in plain sight, still present, still attempting contact, still reaching toward connection, but registering somewhere beneath the surface that you are no longer being reached. That what is being responded to is a version of you that is slightly behind where you actually are. This is separation in its relational phase. And it is not a sign that something is wrong with how you love. It is a sign that the line you are on has begun generating frequencies that the old circle does not have the range to receive. The signal has not weakened. The receivers have simply been built for a different band. The second pattern the High Council identifies in this phase is the incompatibility with old identity containers. This is the experience of returning to a version of yourself, a role you used to occupy naturally, a social identity that once felt like a genuine expression, a behavioral register that was once automatic, and finding that it no longer settles the way it once did. You try to move through it. You try to perform the familiar. You try to be the person that the old environment still expects you to be, and something underneath refuses to fully cooperate, not dramatically, not with resistance you can name and confront directly. It simply sits wrong, like a garment that was once the right size, and is now pulling at the shoulders, constricting across the chest, cutting into places it never touched before. And you keep wearing it anyway because you have not yet located what was supposed to replace it. The mind, when it encounters this misfit, typically runs a diagnostic of self-deterioration. It asks what it has lost, what quality of ease, of social fluency, of confident self-presentation has degraded to create this discomfort in what was once familiar, and it begins searching for the defect, the anxiety that has grown where confidence once lived, the distance that has appeared where warmth once flowed automatically. It concludes that something has atrophied, that a formerly reliable capacity has gone quiet. But the Arcturian reading of this experience is entirely different. The garment is not fitting because the being wearing it has expanded in dimensions the garment was never designed to accommodate. The identity container that once held you comfortably is not rejecting you. It has simply become too small for what the path is currently generating inside you. The architecture of the old self-presentation was calibrated to a version of you that the separation process has already begun to supersede. And the discomfort of attempting to compress yourself back into it is not a symptom of personal dysfunction. It is the pressure of a selected line pushing against a constraint that has already reached the limit of its usefulness. Old identity containers break before new ones form. This gap, this period when the old no longer holds and the new has not yet arrived, is a phase most people mistake for dissolution, for loss of self, for evidence that they are somehow coming apart. But it is not loss of self. It is the first available space through which a self more coherent with the actual path can begin to take shape. The breaking is not the damage. The breaking is the opening. The third pattern in this sequence is what the Arcturian intelligence identifies as the silence between old and new. This is perhaps the most disorienting phase of the entire separation arc, because it offers nothing visible to hold. The old circle has thinned past the point of reliable sustenance. The old identity has loosened past the point of comfortable return. And in that space, in the gap created by what has departed not yet been replaced, there is not yet a visible new direction, a new community, a new coherent structure of belonging to step into. There is only the in-between, and the in-between is not comfortable. It is not peaceful. It does not feel like a sacred pause. It feels like being suspended over a distance you cannot measure, with no surface below you that you trust to hold. In this space, the human mind, absent of the framework that gives the separation its actual meaning, tends toward one of two responses. The first is collapse inward. The person begins constructing a story of fundamental unworthiness, building it from the available materials, the relationships that didn't hold, the belonging that didn't sustain, the repeated experience of trying and not quite landing. They conclude that what they are is simply not connectable, not in the deep way, not in the lasting way. They mistake the in-between for a verdict about their nature, and the verdict they write quietly, persistently, in the interior dialogue no one else hears, is about their own deficiency. The second response is frantic repair. The person begins attempting to restore what has been pruned, reaching back toward old relationships with increasing urgency, trying to resurrect environments the path has already released, performing older versions of themselves with escalating effort in the hope that the former coherence can be recovered. That if they can just find the right combination of effort and adjustment, the old resonance will return. Both responses are the result of living through the separation without the interpretive framework that reveals its purpose. And this is precisely why the Arcturian transmission at this stage matters. Not because it removes the pain of the in-between, because it does not, but because it changes what the pain is evidence of when the in-between is read as a verdict. The person moving through it makes decisions that compromise the very opening the separation is attempting to create. But when the in-between is read as preparation, as the necessary clearing that precedes a path being open to traffic it could not previously carry, something in the response changes. The grief is still real, the disorientation is still real, but they no longer have the authority to write the conclusion. The fourth pattern the High Council identifies is what might be called the reversal of social gravity. Before the separation deepens, most people on a selected line have operated with a natural magnetism, a capacity to draw others in, to hold space, to make people feel received. This magnetism was genuine, it was not performance, and then as the separation progresses, it begins to behave differently. Connections that once formed with ease now require more initiation, more sustained effort, more explicit reaching. Recognition that once arrived without announcement now seems to pass by, even when the external presentation has not changed in any obvious way. The person finds themselves working harder for less return, extending more for less reciprocation, and begins to wonder whether a quality they once took for granted has simply gone quiet. This is not the death of magnetism. This is magnetism undergoing a fundamental recalibration. The frequency at which the selected line is now operating has shifted, and the modes of attraction that functioned at the previous frequency no longer function in the same way at this one. The kinds of connections the recalibrated frequency will eventually draw are not the same as what the old frequency produced. They are more precise, more durable, and more aligned with the actual path. But they exist in a population the old environment was not capable of hosting. The gap between what is departing and what has not yet arrived is experienced in the body and in the emotional field as a significant reduction in belonging. It is real, and it is heavy, but the Arcturian intelligence marks this reduction as a threshold condition, not a permanent state. The gravity has not been lost. It has been redirected toward a receiving population the old environment could not have contained. The silence in the interval is not evidence that the magnetism failed. It is evidence that the path is no longer willing to accept the wrong recipients as substitutes for the right ones. The fifth pattern is the one that carries the most weight in this transmission because it is the one most likely to produce the deepest and most persistent self-condemnation if it is not correctly named. It is the experience of attempting genuine disclosure, of trying to articulate what you are actually moving through at the actual depth at which you are moving through it, and being met not with cruelty, not with dismissal, but with something that in some ways lands harder than either. It is being met with structural incomprehension, The person across from you is not unkind. They are making an effort. They are nodding, reflecting, responding with the vocabulary of care. But what comes back to you is a version of what you said that is flatter than what you meant. Simpler, less precise. A translation that retained the shape of your words but lost the weight of them, and you recognize it immediately. That slight deflation, the awareness that what you actually carry did not make it across the distance between you. So you try again, finding different words, a different approach. And the gap persists, not because the other person failed, but because the channel between your frequency and theirs does not have the bandwidth to carry what you are transmitting. This is the loneliness the Arcturian intelligence identifies as root-specific. It is not the loneliness of being unloved. There are people who love you who still cannot receive you at this depth. It is the loneliness of carrying a frequency for which the current receiving population does not yet have the equipment, and it is one of the most reliable markers that the separation is structural rather than personal. Because this particular loneliness does not respond to effort, to better communication, to more vulnerability, to clearer language. It persists because the incompatibility is not in the communication. It is in the resonance. You were not misunderstood because you communicated poorly. You were misunderstood because what you are carrying requires a receiving environment that has not yet materialized. And that environment cannot materialize while the old one is still occupying the space the path needs to build it in. The Arcturian High Council names this final recognition the convergence threshold. It is the point at which the being who has lived through the departure sequence, the identity loosening, the silence of the in-between, the recalibration of social gravity, and the specific loneliness of structural incomprehension, arrives at a decisive interior choice about what to call what has happened to them. They can call it failure, they can call it deficiency, they can call it proof that they are fundamentally too much, or not enough, or simply unsuited to the kinds of belonging other people manage to sustain. And if they call it these things, every decision they make from this point forward will be shaped by the verdict they have accepted. Decisions that make them smaller, more compliant, more willing to compress themselves back into containers the path has already discarded. They will spend years attempting to recover what was always meant to dissolve, or they can call it what the Arcturian intelligence has always called it: separation, pruning, root refinement, and the forced incompatibility of a selected line with environments that cannot sustain what it is carrying forward. And in calling it correctly, something shifts. Not the external circumstances. Those are still in motion, still uncertain, still reconfiguring in ways that have not yet become fully visible. But the relationship to the circumstances changes. The self-condemnation loses its authority, because the evidence it was built on has been reinterpreted. The grief becomes cleaner, because it is now the grief of deliberate release rather than the grief of personal failure. The path which has been operating beneath the surface of all of this loss, patient, precise, already in motion, becomes slightly more readable. And readability, at this stage, is not a small thing. It is the difference between moving through the in-between with the awareness that there is a direction, and moving through it convinced that the in-between is the destination. You were not discarded, you were separated. And there is a distance between those two words that contains an entirely different future. Repeat this if it reaches you where you are. I do not call the pruning rejection. I was not abandoned. I was prepared. What is being removed from your life right now was never removed because you were insufficient. It was removed because the line you are on could not be held open, while the old environment remained fully in contact with it. The Arcturian intelligence does not operate through punishment. It operates through precision, and the precision of what has been taken from your life. The relationships that fell away without clean explanation. The belonging that thinned before you could locate the cause. The identity containers that stopped fitting before new ones arrived to replace them. Is exactly calibrated to the opening the path is attempting to create. Nothing was removed carelessly. Nothing fell away by accident. The losses were measurements. The distances were coordinates. The separations were the mechanism, not the consequence. The separation is not the end of something. It is the mechanism through which the selected line becomes passable. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this separation has already touched your life. It could be people falling away, the feeling of not belonging, repeated distance, unexplained isolation, or the sense that your old path no longer fits. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who feels alone, cut off, or misunderstood and cannot explain why. And if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a path already in motion. And this is only the beginning.